deaf people and to be alone. I graduated high school from the School for the Deaf in 1976. And looking back at it now, I'm glad that I went to the School for the Deaf.
I grew up at a school for the deaf. I entered school at the age of 4, and when I was born, they didn't know what caused my deafness, but my grandmother decided that she believed it was hereditary. There were many generations of deafness on my mother's side of the family. Now my mom is hearing. She's a CODA, child of deaf adults. But there are many members of her family who are deaf. Her mom and dad, my grandmother and grandfather, great-grandmothers and grandfathers, cousins, aunts, uncles, many generations of deafness, and then myself, of course, who's deaf. Now my mom is hearing. If she had been deaf, it would have been 4 successive generations of deafness, but it skipped my mom's generation and then picked up again when I was born. I attended Oregon School for the Deaf in Salem, and was there from when I was a young kid all the way up to high school when I graduated. All of my siblings know sign. There are 5 of us in the family. I'm the baby. My oldest brother is hearing, and my second brother is deaf. He works at Oregon School for the Deaf as a computer specialist. He used to be a teacher, but now he's a computer specialist. Then I have a hearing brother, a hearing sister, and then myself. And all of us sign. Now, it's more of a home sign. It's not standard ASL. So when I go home and communicate with my family, it's kind of Sheffield family language. And of course, when I'm out in the real world, I use standard ASL to communicate.
Well, I was born deaf, and I don't know what caused it. My parents were both hearing. Both my parents had this deaf gene, and they never even knew it. It was just passed down through both sides of the family from generation to generation. Everybody in the family was hearing until my parents fell in love and ended up having 3 deaf kids, 3 hearing and 3 deaf kids. My brother is the oldest deaf one, and then there's my sister, and then me as the 3 deaf kids in the family. When my brother was about 6, he started at the School for the Deaf because the doctor told us that that was the best place. Then my sister started there at 6. I started though when I was 4 because the school had added a new preschool program.
When you compare deaf culture from when you were growing up to how it is today, what's your experience? Is it the same or different?
Okay, well, comparing how things used to be and how they are now, I think there are a lot of things that you see now that are different. It used to be there was a lot that wasn't acknowledged, whereas today things are a lot more visible. Let me give you an example. I grew up in the Indian culture and then would go outside of the culture into the white town and mix with people there. And I wasn't acknowledged. And what they weren't acknowledging was me. For example, with my Indian background, my Indian culture, when I went outside the culture, people would come up to me and say, "You're Indian, right?" And that question took me aback. I mean, were they asking me whether I'm an Indian or not? And my response was, well, yeah, I guess I am. And it started me to think, back on the reservation, I would never be asked if I was an Indian. When I was at the School for the Deaf, they never asked me if I was an Indian. I got asked things like, can you hear, or can you lip read? I was used to that kind of question. But whether I was Indian, no. That kind of thing was never even acknowledged. Of course, these days we have all sorts of workshops on diversity and workshops about awareness of different ethnicities. Black, Hispanic, Asian, Indian. And there's a developing awareness of interpreters and education and different parts of the deaf community. And in the deaf community, you're seeing more and more people of color than you used to. Of course, you used to have people of color in the deaf community, but they weren't acknowledged. We focused on whether someone was oral or whether they signed English in the 1970s, and then in the 80s, we recognized ASL, and we became more aware of that. And now in the 90s, diversity is the issue, and things have changed in that way. And now at the beginning of the new millennium, the year 2000, who knows what we're going to be looking at next? I'm curious to see what it might be.
That's a really good question. I've noticed a lot of changes. In my grandmother and grandfather's lifetime, the Deaf Club was very important, and they would take me and my brother to the Deaf Club and visit with their friends, and then every week we'd go to someone else's house and we'd watch captioned films and we'd socialize, and deaf people just would get together and spend time talking. Those opportunities have decreased quite a bit, and I think part of that has happened as a result of mainstreaming. Kids are isolated these days. They don't have the opportunity to be with other deaf kids. Now, there's been some great technological improvements and changes, but I think that's also caused a decrease in face-to-face contact. Email, relay services, those things have also decreased the opportunities for deaf people to get together. In the Deaf Club, deaf people were able to sit around and talk. Now, in my grandmother and grandfather's time, there were no TTYs, so if they wanted to visit a friend, they might have to drive 100 miles to a friend's house, get there, and the friend wouldn't even be home, so they'd have to post a note, and then drive all the way back home. But nowadays, with technology, we can call ahead and find out if they're there or not. So this opportunity for deaf people to get together is an important part of the culture, and I hope it doesn't fade away.